Welcome back to the Sacred Birth Circle. This episode is extremely tragic as our guest will be sharing the story of her home birth gone wrong that ended in stillbirth. And she will also talk about her pregnancy after loss, which was a completely different experience. Although every pregnancy is different, we hope that Miles and Nora's story will help you to have a better birth outcome. I'm Anna Vick. This is an important episode. I hope that everyone will listen carefully to the story shared and the advice shared by my guest today, because unfortunately, this is the type of story that very tragic, but it can definitely help save lives. That's why we do what we do. We don't really share it for any other reason. It is very difficult. So I'm very thankful that we are having this conversation today, because Heather's story, I think, will definitely help, inform other future parents as far as what they should do in their pregnancies. Every pregnancy is different, but this might apply to yours. And so we just want to share a little bit about her story. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Heather. My first son, Miles, my first child, died at our planned home birth, April 23rd, 2019. So he will be turning 4 very soon. And my plan was to only have one biological child because at the time we were licensed foster parents in the state of Florida. So we had a foster daughter during the second half of my pregnancy, and then we fostered another child after Miles died. But I just had this vision that I'd have one beautiful pregnancy and then potentially adopt or foster to adopt subsequent children in our future. Unfortunately, though, that home birth plan went awry after being in labor for 37 hours and my midwives being in attendance for about 22 of those. And just so much went wrong, even though they were telling me everything was normal. And even after the fact, they were, kept swearing everything was normal. But as I went through the birth so many times with a fine-tooth comb, I just know in my heart that things weren't normal. I just wasn't closely monitored and, part of the time taken seriously. So while I can't say I'm completely against home birth, I do feel like very strongly about avoiding home birth as a first-time birthing person. It's just that as a first-time birthing person, you have nothing to compare it to. You don't know how your body should be feeling. You don't know kind of what to expect about the intensity of labor and delivery. That was something that kept happening. I was like, is this normal? Should I be feeling this way? Like the pain threshold, all of these things. I was definitely, and I still am, honestly, in the crunchy parenting community. In so many ways, I'm still a crunchy mom. I now have a living child, a daughter named Nora, and she's in cloth diapers and still using donor breast milk and still feeding her organic food. And it's all of these things that aligned with my lifestyle that made home birth make sense to me at the time. And I was deeply, deeply steeped in this crunchy parent. If you don't know crunchy, so people that say, what is crunchy parenting? And I'm like, the only reference I ever heard long ago was like crunchy granola, because they used to call hippies granola. And then for some reason, crunchy came as like a nickname to granola. If anyone knows the history of that, they can comment and let me know. I don't really know. But now a lot of us call ourselves like crunchy parents. So I hate now the term natural birth, because all birth is natural. Every single type is natural. A baby has to come out of the body, and that is natural. But a lot of people call unmedicated birth natural birth. So if I say natural birth, that's what I mean, unmedicated birth. But I'm most likely going to say I desired an unmedicated, out of hospital birth. And that for me meant that at the time I was fearful of an epidural. I was fearful of hospital interventions, the natural birthing community. That's literally my understanding that, what they're called still to this day, natural birthing community, um, helped me feel fearful of radiation during ultrasounds, the cascade of interventions that you hear over and over and over again in the jargon in the natural birthing community, that which means cascade of interventions, if you've never heard that before, is you go potentially have a hospital birth and they pressure you to get induced, or they're on a timeline. And so as soon as you agree to even having an IV, like the natural birthing community is even anti getting an IV for safety reasons at the hospital. So, you could get an IV and then they could push you to have Pitocin. And then if those things don't go, well in a timely manner, then that means you'd have a C-section. And that's just like the worst possible outcome, and or birth trauma in the hospital. And I was like so fearful of all of these things. And I don't think I naturally would have been had I not been reading accounts of, people being anti-hospital birth. I'm just going to say it that clearly, which was really tough. So I had even my own mother saying, "Aren't you scared to give birth at home?" And I was just like so confident that, the worst case scenario would have been, I guess, that I got transferred to a hospital and it ended in a cesarean section. Like, never fear of stillbirth, never fear of my child dying during labor at home before I was able to get medical assistance. None of that even like occurs or is in a proper conversation when, and I don't want to speak for all home births, but I can speak for quite a few that have heard stories over and over again that that's the result. So I'll walk you through, portions of my experience. I was 41 weeks pregnant, almost 42, and I lost my mucus plug. Well, it was Easter week, like Holy Week, and my midwives took off the entire week to go to church and go to, have like Easter in their community. And so they didn't hold any appointments during the whole week, so I couldn't be seen. And that was my 41st week. Well, I've had a lot of experience in researching the Florida midwifery statutes. And on my 41st week, I was supposed to be seen by an outside provider to at least have an ultrasound during my 41st week. That was one of the Florida state midwifery statutes that they broke. Luckily, one of my midwives was in like nearby because my midwives were over an hour away, but she was nearby. So when I lost my mucus plug, she came and checked me. I was 1 centimeter dilated, not having contractions or anything like that. So she went on her way, as did I. And then I don't think it was that night. I think it was like 24 hours later. Excuse me. I went into labor naturally. Contractions started like 8 or 10 p.m. and I had contractions every 10 minutes for 8 straight hours. So somehow I was able to sleep in between them. So all night we let them know. All night I had contractions. Things didn't really ramp up, but they were consistent. So I was like, okay, my body is going into labor. That next morning was April 22nd, Earth Day, and I was 42 weeks at that time. And by the time, I'll like fast forward, I guess, my contractions had ramped up. I had a doula. She was already at my home for several hours. And when my midwives walked in, they kind of were like, well, you're technically 42 weeks, but because you're already in labor, we can continue to see you. But at 42 weeks, any midwife in Florida is supposed to be sending me to a hospital. So they were attending my birth when technically they could, but they were really like just pushing it and pushing it. And I don't understand why, because I don't know if it's ego, they really want to see it through. I mean, if they really want, me to have my birth, which is what I kept telling myself, that, what a gift that I can continue to do this, have this opportunity. But then when my birth went on and on and on, and then it was, it went into the next day and I was already in labor and like active labor for 24 hours. They should have transferred me. I mean, it would have just been the right thing to do. Instead, I was vomiting. They had me do a castor oil shake that they made me, which is castor oil and peanut butter and ice cream. And it did nothing to ramp anything up that I recall. It just made me vomit. And then in the middle of the night, I was having horrible side pain on my right hand side. And I understand now, after the fact, I didn't at the time, that that's a risk for placental abruption. And they didn't take that seriously. I stopped, and I was moving so slowly at that point, in labor for so long, so tired, just like doing laps around my kitchen so incredibly slowly. Like I couldn't even make one lap out of our small home between each contraction. And I was like, why am I in so much pain? And they were just kind of like, I don't know. It could be the baby's position. And at that point, they should have just transferred me to a hospital. I mean, if they don't know that's a risk of stillbirth, then that's a problem because they aren't educated. The fact that I know that and potentially they didn't is just alarming to me. At one point, they had me get into my birthing pool, and I didn't know why, because I wasn't dilated. The reason this was going on and on and on is my cervix just wasn't opening. And very, very, very slowly. I was like at 6 centimeters, maybe almost 7. But this was, anyway, I get into the birthing pool and I start falling asleep. My contractions are still every 2 to 2.5 minutes. So I'm like in labor full on this entire time, but I would rest my head up against the side of the birthing pool and like doze off in that 2-minute period. One of my main midwives, so I have 2, but one was kind of with me at every appointment except one of them the whole way through. And I think they kind of take turns between clients. So that main midwife was sleeping in our guest room and the other was sitting on the couch. And I was like, what do I do? I can't go on. I'm so tired. I'm falling asleep between contractions and they're still like close together. And she's just like, well, rest if you want to. And I was just kind of like, I'm asking for advice. I'm asking for help here. It's not, what I want to do. So in my case, I felt like I wasn't being guided or led through my birth. So then I tried to rest, and I don't know that I got any sleep, but I did lay down for a few hours. And I woke up projectile vomiting into my closet, and they didn't, find that alarming either. They just were like, oh, this is good. If you're vomiting, then, it's really progressing. And then at one point, I think it was actually before I rested, they did a cervical check and my midwife was like, oh, your water broke accidentally when I was doing your cervical check because there's a piece of the bag between, I don't understand how, but I have in my heart, my instinct was that she broke it purposefully without my consent, which I thought we were in a good enough relationship that we could just like talk about this and agree about this. But I just felt like that's what happened because it just felt very odd. Anyway, so my water was broken by the time I woke up in the morning for 8 hours already. And there was light meconium in my amniotic fluid. And still they weren't alarmed enough to send me to a hospital. They were just like, it's light meconium, it's not thick meconium. And so it's really skating on this fine line of risk. And when you think about this pain in my side, I'm vomiting, I'm falling asleep, my labor is then stalling, and then my contractions, spaced out a lot when I did rest. And then the meconium being 42 plus one, I think at this point, weeks pregnant, being advanced maternal age because I was 38, almost 39 years old. I had been seen by a maternal fetal medicine practitioner. And anyway, so this is the last part of the story.
Well,
At
can I
least,
just ask one question, Heather? So
yeah.
you were mentioning all your symptoms to them, but did they check on your baby at all throughout, like heartbeat,
Yes,
figuring out that
yes.
she's still
So
okay? Yeah.
they were there were breaks, but they were supposed to during, what they had recorded as I was in active labor this whole time. They were supposed to be checking every 30 minutes. Well, when I lay down to rest, they didn't bother coming in at all. So they were pretty good about with the handheld Doppler checking on the baby every 30 minutes, but then a long stretch happened where they didn't. And I'll be honest, at this point, I was not fully like aware or paying attention to Miles's movements because I was in active labor. And I don't know about other like birthing people, but you kind of lose track of what's going on when your whole body is contracting. And again, I was a first time mom. And so I'll get to that in just a minute, but I woke up. The reason I woke up and like threw up was because I heard my midwives down in my kitchen like arguing, and all I heard them say was, she should have done that a long time ago. And I thought they were talking about me, like I was doing something wrong. And so I had no point of reference, like what they were talking about. I was like, what should have I done a long time ago? And then I started to kind of get freaked out. So I came downstairs and they're like, okay, your labor's, like slowing down. So and they wouldn't ever like clearly say hospital like transfer. It was so like nuanced and like they were really like skirting around the topic, and I don't know why. And they said, okay, to have this baby today, you have to ramp up these contractions. So it's like, okay. And we did some belly lifts, and then, fast forward to basically the end, I was outside on my back deck, and my doula had me doing some circuits where when you have a contraction, then you like squat down and then you walk until you have another contraction, then you kind of squat to the left and then the next squat to the right, and then so it was like those three types of squats. And I told myself, like my instinct was kicking in or something. I told myself, okay, I'm going to get through this cycle of 10, and then I'm going to go in, I'm going to march in there and say, what the hell's going on? Like, I need to start a conversation. They were talking to my husband here and there. They were talking to my doula here and there, but they were never like talking straight to me. And the whole time I was telling myself, oh, this is because they don't want to bother me and I'm like in labor. But at the same time, it's like, I'm the birthing person, like, don't avoid me. So I got through about 7 cycles of that 10 before I was like, I'm gonna go in there. And they hadn't checked Miles in 30 minutes. 43 minutes had passed, and my midwife kind of came out with this like panic look on her face, like she had lost track of time, and she's like, time to check the baby. And she came out to me, and then how I felt it went was she didn't find his heartbeat, and she's like, let's go inside, you can sit on the couch. And then I sat down. She, couldn't find anything. She's like, stand up, lay down on the couch on your left side, lay on the right side. And then how it felt to me was that she wasn't picking up his heartbeat whatsoever. So she put me on oxygen and called 911. She claims in her medical records that his tones were at 80, but I think she was picking up my heartbeat and never picked up his. But this was all to protect herself. And then the fire department came and they didn't have a Doppler. The ambulance came, they didn't have a Doppler. The ambulance wouldn't allow my midwife to ride with. My midwife did not assert herself or or like make sure she rode with. and they wouldn't let my husband ride with. So I was all alone. I forgot to say that while I was walking my circuits outside, the secondary midwife, but they were to be there the entire time together. And if they weren't there, they'd call in a birth assistant. And that was in the contract I signed with them. So she left my residence because another woman was in labor like 20 minutes away. And she was like, oh, I'm just going to go check on that mom and come back. But she didn't tell me that. She didn't tell my husband that. She left my residence with no informed consent, no birth assistant on the way, left my maid midwife to herself to attend an emergency by herself. So I ride in the ambulance and I don't know what's going on. I don't think it's an emergency. I'm really calm at this point, and all I'm thinking is relief. I'm going to finally get the help that I need from a doctor who's more proactive and going to like help me get this baby out. And no lights and sirens, just casually riding across town. I didn't know why, but then it kind of put me at ease, like, oh, this isn't like actually an emergency and I'm going to be okay with this oxygen on. I had contractions. They were about 4.5 minutes apart. I was lying at this weird, like 45-degree angle because I was like, I shouldn't be on my back. And I couldn't really get comfortable on my side in the back of an ambulance. Anyway, they rolled me into labor and delivery. And the doctor comes in and they do the ultrasound and they're like, there's no heartbeat, he's dead. And I was just like, what? Like, how? It did not occur to me that I was even like in a situation where my life was at risk. So I'm all alone, nobody there, nobody in my support team. My husband was following behind in his car, but I think he came, within like 5 to 10 minutes. And yeah, before he came, like another doctor, like her boss came in to like verify. And then she's just like, you're still gonna have to have this baby. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's what I've been trying to do for the last 37 hours. And then my husband walked in shortly thereafter, and I I didn't want him to hear it from anyone else. So before he can even put my hospital bag down, I was like, did you hear? And he's like, no, what's up? And he's like, and I was like, Miles, he's gone. Miles died. And then
Wow.
yeah, everything just
So do you think that they already had communicated to the ambulance people, like, there's no heartbeat, we're not finding a heartbeat because they didn't even put the siren on? Like, do you think they already knew that there was really no saving Miles, or?
I have no idea. I mean, in everything that my midwife has claimed to this day is that they were picking up his heartbeat. So I
Hmm.
can't believe that would be, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very well like an emergency if they didn't take you with the sirens and like, you know,
Yeah.
bring your husband on board. Like, I feel like that would have been handled different if they maybe thought, that there was a chance. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it was to keep me calm. Maybe my blood pressure had already spiked. I don't know what it was right at that moment, because when I got to the hospital, they told me all the news. And I think it was after the news, my blood pressure spiked way up. And then they were like, well, we have to actually not like induce you right now, or like we have to slow everything down. We have to put you on a magnesium drip because we think you have preeclampsia at this point. And we're fearful that you'll have a seizure or a stroke. So we have to, they said 12 to 24 hours on that magnesium. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm ready to have this baby. That's what I was hoping was going to happen in the next like first hour of being here or however long. So the drip ended up only being 10 hours because I was reacting really well to it, I guess. And then they did induce me with Pitocin. And I don't know how much time passed, but I was pushing for 4 hours by the time my cervix was open. So I had to push for 4 hours. And I keep hearing stories of women who like, even though their babies were dead, they had like a smooth, and I'm just like, I don't know what's up with my body because
Yeah, and that's a really hard thing about, you were
yeah.
talking about the natural birth community. It's just the topic is always discuss about birth, like it's whether your baby knows what to do, you know what to do. It's,
Yeah.
your body will go into action and everything will be fine. And so I definitely feel like for yourself and your story and other women that just remembering though that there could be an emergency at some point and not setting up these women to think like, oh no, no, your body will do it. Like it's going to be perfect. That's not good enough, and they should definitely give you the risk factors and, being that you were over 40 weeks and all of that. I mean, just listening to it, it's really hard for me because, I'm in this world of stillbirth prevention. I'm like, oh no, red flag, red flag. That was not good.
Yep.
Like I know where it's
No.
going, of course, because I know Miles isn't here. And like the whole thing is just really traumatic. And I know a lot of like missed opportunity, of course, too, which is really hard for us to live with on the side of being the parent, trusting the people with our care, and then this happening when especially could be prevented. So, I felt so bad like saying at the beginning, we're going to talk about this hard story. And I don't like to preface it that way because I don't want people to not listen, because I think this is
Yeah.
what's going to save somebody's life. Because if you refuse to listen to unfortunate stories like this, then you're always going to just assume the best. And even for myself, and I think about it all the time, like I didn't think my son was dying. I did not imagine it. He was 32 weeks though, but still it was like not something in my mind. No one ever talked to me about stillbirth. And so I feel like I would have reacted so differently. Like I would have gone crazy, instead of walking in slower, where I was kind of panicked, but still calm because I thought, he was okay. I was just paranoid.
Yeah.
So it's just a different feeling. And if you actually talk about it with the mothers more, I feel like we can at least be like, oh, I'm having a weird feeling here. Like, let me trust that and let me do something about this. And
Yeah.
as a parent, you do become that type of like mama bear anyway. So I feel like in pregnancy, we need to train moms to like, okay, you need to know, like, no matter what anyone else is telling you, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you need to go in there and speak up and just not go along for the ride, because
Yeah.
they don't know. They don't really know what's going to end up happening. Every pregnancy and birth is going to be different.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah,
Yeah. And I was so fearful of hospital birth that twice I was like thinking, I want to just go to a hospital. And at night I was telling my husband, I'm having those like um thoughts, but neither of us really wanted that. And so he was just like, you just gotta like stick to the plan and keep your head up and like stay positive, and like just to even be so indoctrinated that like going to the hospital is like a horrible thing. And then I was even telling my doula when I was outside, oh, I'm in a bad place. Like, she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, my mind is going to a bad place because I want to go to the hospital. And then I think she didn't really know what to do with that. And maybe she was thinking, yeah, we probably should. I just like nobody was, I mean, it wasn't her job whatsoever. I don't blame my doula whatsoever. She was there to be my support, and she did a phenomenal job. She could have ended, at leaving me at the hospital, but she came and she attended my entire birth. She stayed at the hospital. She was with me for whatever that was, like 30 hours, maybe not quite. And then at the hospital for like another 15. So she was with me for like 48 hours almost. So she was amazing. But yeah, I don't know.
yeah. And I
It's,
think it's important to point out the distinction. The doula is there for like comfort care and to support you and, give you some advice on maneuvering and things like that. But they're not birth attendants. They're not supposed to be the one making this medical call. Like, we need to go to the hospital. I mean, if they're there with you, hopefully they would know and they're able to give you some of their advice. But you did have the midwives, which it was on them to do that. And it does feel to me like you put complete trust in them more so than yourself. And you didn't know, like you said, I wouldn't, as a first time mom, really recommend this. But I wonder if you still now would do another one. Like, let's say you didn't lose Miles and you were now on like a second baby and you already had a good experience at the hospital. Like, would you then switch, you think, to home birth and think it's okay? I mean, just thinking about the women who choose to do it, like a lot of women do it maybe for their second or third baby, and because like, oh, I already know how to birth, so I should just be able to do this at home. But for
yeah,
me, like, every pregnancy is perfect until it isn't. So I'm in that mindset because I know like you could be birthing anywhere and something like really emergency level happens, I would prefer to be in a hospital where all the stuff is available. Like, use it all on me. That's where I am, and I can't, I'm biased, obviously, since I lost a son too. So I don't know what you would think, because you do preface it. You said as a first time mom, you wouldn't recommend it, but
Yeah.
you think,
Um, if I still didn't know what I know now, I would be in the same mindset that it's safe. It's like I had miles in the hospital just because, we're in the military and it's, basically free, where I should have been like the path of least resistance. I would have gone for it for sure if I had a second biological child. And okay, so almost all of the home birth like friends that I now have, home birth death friends, it was their first child, but one of my close friends, it was her second. So she'd been there. She had had a hospital birth, and then I don't remember if she was trying for a VBAC or she just wanted. It was a birthing center in New York State. But yeah, same kind of story. They pushed her and pushed her and pushed her, and like in labor, pushing, like literally pushing, to have her delivery for hours and hours and hours. And yeah, babies just, I don't think, survive non-monitored extended pushing. I've heard that story from another woman in Las Vegas as well. Yeah, there was something else. So the midwives had an investigation opened up against them because my doula's boss actually reported them to the Florida Department of Health Board of Nursing. And so they had an open investigation, and what came out, well, it didn't come out through that. But I ended up suing my midwives also in a private malpractice case. And what came out through that was that my MFM had recommended that I don't go past 40 weeks, and my midwives didn't obtain those records. They said they were having trouble getting them from the military hospital, even though I was seen privately through like a second party or third party hospital that was not a military hospital. Anyway, just their like laziness in not getting my medical records. Like I could, and had they followed that recommendation, if they got it, I mean, I would hope that they had the integrity to do that, is that I would have been induced at 40 weeks and Miles would be here. Like there's so many, not, and then the midwifery statutes too that they broke. Had they had those checks and balances in place and they were actually following them and actually got my records from the MFM, like Miles wouldn't be dead. I trust that. So it's just hard. And then having those like glimpses of intuition that I wanted to go to the hospital. Like I have so much guilt for not speaking up, and I have so much guilt for being like so fearful of going to the hospital. And it's like when you're even 20 minutes or 5 minutes from a hospital, it's like there's no amount of time that can potentially save your baby. Like when you're talking about like delivering a baby that's not breathing, or reduced heart tones or loss of heart tones, like it's basically too late. Like you have maybe 3 minutes. Like I got to the hospital and my sister was like, why aren't they inducing you? Why didn't they just like rush you to have a C-section? And I asked my doctor like the next day in recovery, and she's just like, the fact, like the chance of your child having like brain damage is like so high. Like, and then is that what you would choose? And then, I'm like, no. And
wow,
so,
but that should have been discussed with you guys. Don't think they should have made a decision for you, but again,
yeah.
maybe they already knew it was too long. Um, Thinking about what you said about the meconium too, did they ever find out why? Was he in distress? Was it that you were preeclamptic and having an abruption, or
They didn't say like my placenta had signs of abruption. The nuchal cord was wrapped around his neck 2 times very tightly. So my best guess is cord compression. I haven't sent my placenta off to further testing. And then we had opted to have an autopsy, but because in like Florida, it's a federal program, they denied us. to have one. So then if like, oh, if you want a private one, and I was like, I just can't imagine how much that would cost. And I was just like, why were we denied? And she's like, well, on paper, you're over 42 weeks. You're 38 years old. You were preeclamptic after you came in. The nuchal cord was wrapped 2 times tightly. You were in labor for 37 plus hours. Uh, how did your baby not die is kind of the sense I got. And she didn't like say it in that way, but she was like, there were plenty of indicators that this, baby wasn't going to survive under those circumstances. And so like, I always say like on paper, my home birth was like an absolute train wreck. And I was just going through it, minute by minute, hour by hour. I just wish someone could have saved me from it, because even my doula, like, she was trying to advocate for me. At one point, I was like having blood, I guess, in the toilet, and she reported that back to the midwives, and they didn't do anything or take anything seriously because it was like light pink and it wasn't like, a ton of blood or anything like that. But that's in my doula's notes. Like, she found that alarming. She reported it to the midwives and they did nothing. And so I just don't know at the end of the day, like, at the end of the day, when I'm in labor for so long and they're not directly, asking me, do you want to go to the hospital? Like, why are they keeping me home? Like, what are they trying to prove? And had they just asked me a few more times, then, I don't know. I like to think, well, I was trying to power through, really, because I thought I could do it. I was like a CrossFit athlete and I knew my body was strong enough. I didn't end up having an epidural at the hospital. I birth miles unmedicated and just was always trying my best to like physically have the strength to do it. But there were so many opportunities to correct that, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, we're doing some research for Push for Empowered Pregnancy right now for intrapartum stillbirth, because there was actually one mom who shared her story with us and we put it up as a reel on our Instagram. And she said a lot of the tips you're giving are for prevention of stillbirth, like prior to being at birth and in birth. But of course, we do lose babies in birth, and that's actually one of the most preventable times too, that you should be able to, with the proper care, save a baby in birth. Like that should not be happening at all. So
Yeah.
we will be putting up a page on our website too soon with more information on that and research. But oh, it just breaks my heart. And if anyone follows her or doesn't follow her, please follow Heather and read everything she shares. She has some really great pictures of Miles that are just beautiful. He was such a beautiful boy. And
Hmm.
also, you did have a rainbow baby. So I don't know if you want to share just a little bit about how this
Yeah.
changed you in your pregnancy journey, like how you advocated differently or what your choices were different from that previous pregnancy.
Yeah. Big time different, advocacy on my behalf. Like, I wasn't letting anything happen. Her name's Nora. She's 21 months today. The military, of course, moved us, which I was grateful for, from Florida to California in that time between Miles's birth and Nora's conception. So she's a COVID baby. I had her May 6th, 2021. And I wasn't going to go beyond 39 weeks. My OB told me that, like, made that decision for me. And I was very grateful. I'm like, thank you for making some decisions for me. This is what a provider should do. I had an MFM who was very compassionate. At one point, I got really freaked out, and she even let me text her at like 7 p.m. She's like, just text me, I'll call you back. She called me at 7 p.m. on her drive home or when she got home. And I was like, wow, this is what care is. Holy cow. And then I was at, I think, one of the better hospitals in the area, which was only like 6-minute drive from my house. So I was grateful for the location of that. It didn't have a NICU, which kind of, I don't know, I kept kind of waffling, like, what, because you think of everything, like, what if something goes wrong at this stage anyway. But I think in my 38th week, or no, sorry, 37th week, I had an ultrasound. I was supposed to have it at 36, and then they were busy. And then my care wasn't perfect, I will say that. OBs do a lot of things wrong. She said, lightning will not strike twice. And I was just like, I could punch you right now. I didn't tell her that, but I had a huge rant on the drive home after that appointment. And she tried to like, it's a long story, but they thought maybe I had a blood clot with Miles, or a cord clot, if that's a thing. I can't remember exactly, but my protein numbers were off, and then I tested them again and they were fine. So she like forgot, I think. And then she was like, no, you've always been normal, normal, normal. And I was like, I went through all this testing with an MFM. And then anyway, so at that 37-week ultrasound, the cord was around Nora's neck. And I was so freaked out. And then she's like, the blood flow through the cord is really good. And I was like, okay. And then I don't think I said much at that appointment, but I went on a hike with my friend and rather walk through the woods because I was 38 weeks pregnant. Um, and I was like, I'm freaking out. I called my OB and I talked to a midwife friend of mine and I talked to my hypnotherapist at the time, had all this therapy going on, um, EMDR therapy and hypnotherapy concurrently, just because I didn't want to freak out. I didn't want to get to labor and freak out because I lost my child during labor. I was like, fine. And anyway, and I knew I would never see my due date because some people, in their subsequent pregnancies see their due dates pass and have that really sad day and all that worries. And I was like, I'll never reach 42 weeks ever again. Anyway, I called my OB and I was like, you just have to understand. Nora's starting to tick some boxes. You saw calcification on my placenta. The nuchal cord is wrapped around her neck. I'm freaking out. This anxiety cannot be good for my baby. Like, can we please bump up my induction? And she's just like, I'll meet you halfway. Cause I think I was like at 38 or 38 plus one. I'm like, I'll come in today. And she's like, let me meet you halfway. We meet you at like 38 plus 4 and we'll induce you early. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Cause I was just like, she's full term, she'll hopefully be fine. Anyway, I got in and had all of the interventions. And I have no birth trauma from this birth and a beautiful, healthy daughter. I had Cytotec for 24 hours. Then I had Cervidil for 24 hours. These are cervix ripening methods. And then I had Pitocin. And then I had nitrous gas just to help with like some more for the head, not for pain. And then in the very end, I had some fentanyl, like a really low dose, like the most they can, or I don't know, I guess the most they can give, it within like totally reasonable low doses. And then I had both gestational diabetes and group strep B that I supposedly didn't have with Miles. So I like had all the things. And she kept bumping up the Pitocin, but would communicate. And then I was like, this is getting too intense. Can you take it down? Like great communication with my nurses. Went into the shower and she was just very mindful and listening to me. And she peeks in the shower and was like, your body's taking over this labor. I'm going to turn the Pitocin off because she's listening. And that's what medical providers do. Oh, and I had constant fetal monitoring on a mobile unit. So I could walk the halls. I walk like a mile a day. This induction was 85 hours, 85 hours. So it's not that after something happens, everything's going to go fine. It's not that you go to a hospital and it's going to be like 3-hour labor. It's not that the second time you have a baby, it's much quicker. No, my body cervix does not open, but I'm a strong mind and strong body. And I, am there for my babies. I also chose not to have an epidural and to go unmedicated as far as like pain with Nora as well. And then she was out in 3 pushes, but her head came out and the doctor, the OB was like, that cord is pretty tight. And she yells it out really loud. And I'm like, oh my God, no. And I just like pushed with all my might. And the doctor was actually reaching behind her to get like, I think a clamp or scissors to cut the cord right there. And then, scissors. And then Nora like flops on the table and she had one arm on her. Like, she grabs her and she's like, all righty then. And I got to have delayed cord clamping and skin to skin. And I still got so much of what I wanted with my birth with Miles in a hospital birth, even with like medical intervention and that cascade of intervention. And my baby got here safely. Something that I was so fearful of that caused my child's life. That caused Miles' life for sure. So that was my
That
stood
is
up for
that's
like,
crazy. It feels like the same with me. My rainbow pregnancy, as we call it, it was just so intense, and I'm like, it couldn't have just been like a nice, easy pregnancy this time around. But no, bed rest. I had the cerclage. I had, almost lost him at those 20 weeks, and then had to go through like 17 weeks of bed rest and then 1 week in the hospital with low fluid, which I was like, what does that mean? And I started Googling and like, oh no, cord compressions can happen. And I didn't even know at the time that's actually what caused Ellen to die. So it was just weird. I had this weird intuition. I'm like, I'm not leaving now. I'm just staying at this hospital until the baby's out now. So like, keep me here or take him out now. It just totally changes your mindset as far as like, oh, let's trust the baby. Let's trust our body, which, you still, in a sense, we want everyone to trust their self, of course, and their body. I mean, that's the main thing is each person is different though. So for them to assume that it's going to work out, that's the
yeah,
problem. That
yeah,
narrative is the problem, not empowering the mom. Of course, we want to empower everybody to feel like they can trust themselves and their body, but not to say like if someone wants to intervene, stop them because your body will know what to do, like that's where it's a problem when they don't want you to use the hospital's advice or to get the scans at the end, which, we don't all get a third trimester scan anyway. So
nope. They offered at 26 weeks, and I was like, yeah, definitely. Or 36 weeks. Yeah. But with Miles, I had one at the very first one at whatever, 9, 10, 11 weeks, and then at 20, and then I only had one at 30 because of the MFN. And then he was like, he's measuring perfectly, you don't have to come back. But rarely you have a 30-week scan. And yeah, my body does not know what to do. My body cannot be trusted to birth a baby naturally without help. I am have no ego around that, but I did before, or I just thought you go to a prenatal yoga class and they're like, oh, your body just knows, your baby knows. And the community is still saying the same stuff, and now like free birth and having nobody in attendance is like a big wave. I thought of it as a first time mom because I read enough about it, like I feel like I could do that, and it's like, oh my gosh, no way, no way. Miles would have died. I don't even know, like I might have birthed him eventually, but then I would have birthed him dead. Like, oh, I can't even imagine. Like, but
yeah.
the thing about my midwives is they've missed like 6 births. So the thing with the home birth is you could be birthing alone, because if they're an hour away and they don't take you seriously enough, yeah, no. Women birth with just their partner there, just like their partner and their mother there. And they walk in and they're like, oh, glad baby's okay. Let's weigh them. And, it's like,
Yeah, and I think that's the problem is there's a survivor's bias. Like, of course, there's many nice stories about this working out because not every baby is going to be in distress or have a problem happening. So, of
yeah,
course, if that happens and they are able to birth and it's a beautiful birth at home, you could share those pictures all over social media and make it very glamorized for that situation. That was perfect. But they
yeah.
don't rarely talk about, I've never actually seen a post about a stillbirth happening in these scenarios. Like, of course, they're not going to post that. I mean, who wants to, especially if this is your business? But that's where I think is a misleading of the followers that follow these accounts that are just saying only the good things. They're only seeing the success stories. And, statistically, it might take them a while to lose a baby. I don't know how many of these midwives lost, but, they have to birth quite a few babies before they're going to see a stillbirth, regardless. So
Yeah.
maybe they hadn't had this happen before. I don't know.
Unfortunately, they had only been in business since September, like on their own. They'd worked in hospitals. I don't even know if they were like L&D nurses though. But so from September to April, they didn't have any losses. But then by April, not even a year in business, Miles died. Supposedly, none died since, but one woman did say her child has cerebral palsy now, and she thinks it's because of their negligence. Yeah.
I mean, anything to happen with the cord, and it's hard because you can't see it all the time. And then most pregnancies, if you're low risk, you're not getting like the scan at the end. They're not going to ever look at the cord, the flow of the blood or anything, period.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at least if you were in the hospital, they could be checking a little bit more and, in my case for pregnancy after loss, I was like on the monitor too. I was like, do not remove that. Like it needs to be on there 24/7 because I don't trust myself to notice like if he's not moving anymore,
Yeah.
what's going to happen there. So I was definitely reliant on that machine because I was just too scared. But
Yeah.
I mean, they don't use
And
it for everyone either.
right, they do not. But we talked about that prior. I asked a lot of questions with my second pregnancy to make sure I was going to get the care that I needed, and that was the hospital and the OB I wanted to go with, because I would have changed mid-pregnancy had I not been getting the answers I was seeking. And but she was pretty great. She wasn't perfect, but she was pretty great. But even the constant fetal monitoring, like it's great, but it's stressful because at one point, I think on like day 2 of my induction, her heart rate was going up. It was like spiking, and I was just sitting on the birthing ball, kind of swaying, like not really stressed or walking around or anything. And my partner was getting really like nervous and emotional, and that made me really nervous and emotional. And then, the nurse came in and we're both like in tears. What's wrong? And she's just like, well, you have that group strep B. I know you don't really want to take like a Tylenol, but like we think that you could, your infection could be giving you a fever and stressing the baby just a tiny bit. And then so of course, like I'm gonna do anything, but I'm so crunchy that I was like, no, unless I absolutely have to, I'm not gonna just like take Tylenol. I mean, gosh, you'd think I'd learn. But I took the Tylenol, my fever came down, Nora was fine. But my OB had to like step in too and say, hey, like this is what's going on, explain it a little bit better than the nurse was. And
Yeah, but
yeah,
that's good. I feel like you were definitely more informed as far as what was happening throughout the
yeah,
process and why you were being offered certain drugs
yeah,
that could be beneficial for your pregnancy, for the birth, and then, hopefully still give you the experience as much as possible that you were trying to have more natural. Um,
yeah,
I mean, I never got to do that because I had to have C-sections every time. So sadly, I don't know what it's like, but I applaud you for trying to stick to, your original dream, you know, birth, which you unfortunately didn't get to have fully with Miles. And
yeah.
how have
It
you
was really
felt?
important to me. Go
Yeah,
ahead, sorry.
like I know after pregnancy, after loss, you obviously are parenting. So do you want to share a little bit about how you're dealing with parenting after loss? And then you do have a resource you wanted to share, and we'll put that in our links as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, yeah, one resource I definitely want to share about like being in the hospital with a second birth, but your first living child is a hospital door sign. So on my Instagram, Wellness and Grief, I think the second pin post at the top is a hospital door sign, and that saved me so much. And I have a post, I think it was either in that post or I think was describing like how that the hospital door sign saved me and like all the people coming in, because it's just not your nurse and your OB coming into a hospital. There's like all these people, and then even after the baby's born, all these people asking all these questions. So you don't want to hear, is this your first? And so that informed people who didn't want to talk about it and then informed people who did. And so, we wrote on there, it's safe to talk about Miles and we'd love to talk about him. So then my nurse like said, tell me all about your first birth, and, had all these really intimate, beautiful moments with our birthing team. And then, so how am I doing? I don't know. Like, it's so hard having like a toddler and being like, I should know what I'm doing because this is my second child. And it's hard to have a second child and then no knowledge. Like, so I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, like just always doing the best. I feel like I'm more patient, more compassionate, because like I just don't take her for granted whatsoever. Not that I would take Miles for granted, but it's just like a different vibe, I think, parenting with a dead child and a living child. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I send her to nursery half a day, 5 days a week, because I'm trying to hold down a part-time job, but it's also for my mental health. I'm just like, some days are really hard and I don't ever want to like get impatient with her or like do anything wrong. So I'm kind of like, let me have her socialized at school so I can have my breaks. And it's all like for my mental health. And like, I think that's really important, is like do everything for your family, but also for yourself. And the military moved us again. So when Nora was only 6 months old, they moved us to England. So we've been in England now since November of 2022, 21. Yeah, over a year. And so I'm trying to parent with no support, no village. I'm growing it very slowly, but it's like I lean on her, teachers at her daycare to just like help me because it's like I don't have family. They can come visit like once a year, twice a year, and just do the best we can. And it's hard, there's days when you're grieving, but you're having to parent, but they bring so much joy to your life. So it's like grieving, I don't know, grieving in some ways like kind of gets easier or gets compartmentalized when you have time to yourself or time after they go to bed or time when they're napping, and then you can have your cry or driving them to school and you're like crying because you're hearing something on the podcast. But yeah, I don't know. I lost a lot. I have a lot of trauma, a lot of trauma. And um, I lost so much time too because I decided to start my family so late. And so I had Nora at 40. I'm 42 now, turning 43 this year. And just like, even if I wanted to have another child, like the risk of that, like, I feel like my midwives took that away from me. Like I still feel pretty confident we'd only have one biological living child, but it's like I feel like I shouldn't now. Like that's kind of off the table for me. And people are like, oh, you can have kids, but it's just like the risk of genetic and all of the things that I just don't want to face. It's like I already had a child that died. I don't want to face like pregnancy complications or a loss or like, anything. So it's a lot more complex than just like losing a child and then having this rainbow baby. I think I've been grieving lately, like watching my younger, peers. And when I say peers, I mean other lost moms, like having their rainbows and then getting pregnant, being pregnant now, or having their second living child after, a lot of women have their first pass away, but not all. And just being like, even if that's not my truth, like that isn't gonna ever be a reality for me. And I'm so happy for them, but it's just like a little bit of like, that's what I've been experiencing. I feel like being almost 4 years out from Miles's death, the grief has gotten lighter, but the waves are different because you're watching,
Mhm.
people have things that you can't have and won't have. And so, yeah.
It's difficult because I always thought I'd have a lot of children, and as many losses as I've had, I'm like, oh, I would have had a big family if they'd all survived, and I had two miscarriages and lost Owen. So I think the feeling you're having might be similar to me, where I feel like I'm a mother of three, but I technically only raised two. They're here. So I always feel like there's someone missing, and that's that feeling of having another baby, but I don't really want to have another baby. I just want Owen.
Yeah.
It's weird, because it's like I birthed him. I want him here with us. I don't want another baby after, the one after doesn't make me feel okay about having lost him. So
Hmm.
it's always this weird feeling of emptiness. But I know you're gonna put out a support grief. I think you said it was either like a PDF or something that you're gonna share soon, and
Hmm.
working on writing as well. So we look forward to seeing what you come up with. And as far as your platform, I think it is a really nice community, even though it's online, that you're, raising and, creating in Miles' memory as well. So everyone, please follow Wellness and Grief if you want to connect with Heather, and feel free to share your babies. We always love to hear their names and talk
Yes.
about your stories, which are so important. And if you want to be on here with us as well, let me know, because I love to interview both parents as well as providers and researchers. I have a whole bunch of people now that I've been listening on podcasts I'm really excited to try to invite on here. So I'll be alternating that. But I just hope that we can help somebody out there. I know every story is going to be different. And if you choose home birth, we just want you to have another story just to have in your mind, in the back of your mind. So if you ever feel a little something's off there, trust your gut and speak up for yourself, and just go, into the hospital as soon as you feel that feeling, because
Hmm.
we don't know. I mean, it could go perfectly, and we sure hope so. But if you have that feeling, the worst thing is to just not speak up, tell these people like who are supposed to be telling you, um, I don't feel comfortable here anymore.
Yeah.
And, if you go in and
Mhm.
everything's perfect still, you might feel like, oh man, I came in for nothing. But, we don't think of it that way, because we feel like if your baby's okay, that's what matters, technically. Um,
Yeah. Even if you don't have care set up at all, because like if you choose to have a home birth and that's your plan the whole time. I had no relationship with the hospital where I delivered Miles, but any labor and delivery unit is going to be open at any time. So just go in to the closest one if you have any worries, because they will see you. I was afraid to go into, I mean, I didn't have reduced fetal movement, so but I would have been afraid to go into the military hospital because they would have been like, you're overdue. We're gonna, that was my biggest fear. Like, we're gonna induce you right now. And they were gonna like hold me against my will or something. And that probably wouldn't have happened. And I didn't need them for anything. But lo and behold, I didn't even have Miles where I did have initial some care set up. Like it was at a third hospital that I had never stepped, foot in for anything related to that. But they were wonderful when they delivered Miles and my aftercare. So yeah,
Yeah.
just go in. I mean, even if you're traveling too, like I feel like people don't talk about that enough. Like I've heard a story on a podcast about someone was traveling. It's like, I had reduced fetal movements and I had to go into this hospital like across the country, but yeah, they'll
Hmm.
help you.
Well, it's always important, I think, to have that exit plan. So if
Yes.
this is your plan and you're doing the home birth, then make sure you do start to set up like where would be my emergency situation? Like where would I go? How would we do it? Like talk to your midwife or your doulas, whoever's helping you with this home birth, to really have that outlined. You don't want to just figure it out that moment. It would just be too late, really. So,
Yeah.
for you to rush there and have them already know about you, it'd probably be a lot better than you just showing up, you
Yep.
know, and you don't know how you're going to be met. Sometimes I've heard of people not getting the best, reaction from the people who are like, what are you doing? Why were you doing this at home? Like,
Yep.
not be so nice sometimes. So it's better
Hmm.
if you already have this communication ahead of time.
Definitely.
But, we all have to make the best decision for our own selves and our pregnancy. So I hope this helps
Mhm.
somebody. And thank you so much, Heather, for sharing and talking about Miles with me today, and Nora. And I love seeing them on your Instagram. So thank you for doing everything you do.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Special. We hope this has helped you with planning out your birth plan. I know that there will be changes for everyone in the moment, but we hope that you have a team that will listen to you and help you advocate for what you need. Remember to share this episode on social media so you can help others in your circle grow their knowledge and have a better birth outcome. Remember that all the posts that we share and our episodes are not meant to be medical advice. We are simply trying to help you and inform you as you continue your pregnancy, but always remember that you should consult your provider if you have any questions or concerns. They're there to help you and they are available to you 24/7, even if you have to go into the hospital or the ER. Again, follow us on social media to continue up to date with our next episodes and our posts. And feel free to connect with us in the DMs. If you have any questions, we would be happy to be there for you. You are not alone. This is your community, and we hope that you will continue to watch our future and past episodes to continue to add to your knowledge as we interview birth workers, providers, researchers, and even people who have experienced different births, so that when you get to your birth, you'll be a little bit more informed and prepared for whatever comes your way. Goodbye for now.